good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My apologies to those of you who may have tried to use the old link. Um, I'm sorry, when I was setting it up, I didn't realize I changed the link. So if you want to join us, you're welcome. Please use the link that is shown on your screen right now. Tonight, we'd like to talk about Zimbabwe. I think many people would agree that after 46 years of independence, we are still stuck in a de facto one-party state, and we are now sleepwalking into a nightmare. This constitutional amendment number 3 should not be a problem, and yet it is. And the underlying reason, of course, is that in 46 years of our independence, we have failed to govern ourselves. We have failed to come up with the rules and the political system, a functional political system that allowed the rule of law. We have a regime, ZANU-PF thugs, who believe they have the divine right to rule the country, and we have been stuck with that for the last 46 years. This is tragic. This is one of the problems that we have faced in Zimbabwe. We keep going over and over the same issues. And now we've created, through this constitutional amendment number 3, a political crisis to add on top of the economic crisis that has left millions of our people living in abject poverty and millions more forced to leave the country, either as economic or political refugees. This is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. Ben, welcome to the program.
Good day to you and good day to our viewers. Thank you for joining us. You know, it becomes very tedious that, we are still talking the same story for years and years and years. We have been telling people that the source of our problem is the rigging of elections and our participation. To them, telling them just that will open a can of insults and slurs and so many things. Everything that is going around us, is secondary, is because of the main problem. We got to understand why do ZANU-PF want to amend the constitution. It's so simple. I really don't know what it will take to move Zimbabweans to actually see, the bigger picture. If anyone that has a simple mind would just ask themselves, why would ZANU-PF want to change the constitution? Why would they want to amend it at that particular, section? And the answer is clear. Clear as broad daylight. It has to do with election. And that was what we have been saying all along. So I really don't know how you can help somebody that refuses treatment.
Well, SAPES had one of their discussions in which they pulled together a number of other participants. And a lot of good stuff is emerged from it. And I would like to recommend to the listeners out there who have not had a chance to listen to it, you can easily get it on YouTube if you search for SAPES Constitutional Amendment number 3, the scourge of state condoned violence against those opposed to it. One of the issues that is emerging ever since ZANU-PF went down this route of trying to amend the constitution is the violence. The nation is not being allowed to have a meaningful debate on the issue. The violence has taken center stage. One of the participants in the SAPES one explains some of the violence that the country is now being subjected to.
The state takes in trolling and harassing and denigrating victims and the entities representing the victims right up to the UN level. And the case of Blessed Mhlanga at the moment as being a person who has testified. We've got feedback now, sorry. A person who has testified at UN level now being very nastily threatened, and his family being threatened by entities within Zimbabwe with very little chance of protection. So Reverend Matata, I'd really like to encourage the church to take up its role of protection, because the safer spaces for voices in Zimbabwe are slowly, or not actually rapidly, being eroded by the state entities. And I think that it is time for a very tough conversation with the church leadership around the duty to protect, because right now the citizens don't have that much safety net to fall back on if they have any problems. So I'd like to actually leave it there, because I see that Professor Maduku is now online, and I would really like him to talk through what happened to him and the impact. I mean, the very serious impact. And I hope, Professor Maduku, you heard, the Supreme Court judgment compelling the NPA to investigate the 2007 violence, and that case has never been completed. So impunity for me is the biggest issue. It has the largest impact because it means that we have a very large section of the population who've never received justice for what has happened to them. And so are very aware of the outcome of even more violence against dissenting voices. So thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody on this panel.
Before I bring in Professor Maduku, Francis, just a follow-up question. From where you stand in your organization, what is the incidence of these violence abductions in recent months?
So I think we need to be, what makes me sad is that, the cases that are happening in the urban areas are very publicized and available on social media. But there is a very active increasing presence of agents within the rural areas, really targeting long-time activists, long-time believers in the democratic process, targeting their families. So we're seeing a healthy, between 50 and 100 cases a month of quite nasty nighttime visits, partial abductions, once again, that nasty beast of sexual abuse is raising its head, and I think we just need to, and it links very well to statements made in the media, and then the incidents start happening. The urban stuff is in the public domain, but I think we need to also look at the national sphere. What is happening in the communities. So yes, yeah, that is the sad truth.
That is truly worrying, because the minute we start drifting into violence, the game is up. The ordinary people cannot fight the regime. That is a basic reality. And I totally agree with the last speaker there, that when you start moving the violence into the rural areas, a lot of it will never be revealed. Urban centers information can circulate, particularly in this day and age of mobile phones. People can record what is happening. In the rural areas, that opportunity is not there, or is hardly there. And the regime has had a stranglehold on the rural population in Zimbabwe. We've seen it during the 1983 to 1987 Kukurahundi massacre. And this was repeated again during the 2008 Operation Mafotera Papi. And so what we are seeing here is Mark II of that level of violence. The regime, whenever it felt its hold on power is threatened, it has resorted to wanton violence. And I really dread to admit that we may find ourselves being sucked into Kukurahundi Mark III. That is the tragedy of Zimbabwe.
I've heard a colleague. I was having a chat with a colleague in one of our social media groups, and they still insist that participating in rigged elections is an option. And I brought up the situation of those in rural areas, and I asked him that these people in rural areas right now, what is going on, they do not have a free will to choose or to vote where they feel or like. We have heard so many times where ZANU-PF top dogs have been intimidating the rural folk, telling them, the Sabuku, the headman, would be in the front, the people in the middle, and the chiefs at the back when it's time to go and vote. How then do you propose that you are going to protect these people? How then do you propose you're going to protect a vote that they never have? We may go round and round in circles and discuss, the violence and the problems that come up because of the election. But we are not addressing the real problem. The real problem is ZANU-PF has been rigging elections time and time again. Yes, the operations and the mechanisms, how they do it, it keeps changing, but the end result is they are rigging elections. And ZANU-PF has been warned. I think we have to realize that 2023 was a very good blessing if only we played our part, if only the opposition did not take up seats. SADC had called for an extraordinary summit, one where they put ED to task and warned ZANU-PF, we will not continue tolerating the rigging of elections. We will not continue tolerating substandard elections. We know what you are doing. The jig is up. And we saw how Mnangagwa looked when he came out of that meeting. We saw how shaken he was from that meeting. And it is from that meeting that has given birth to this whole amendment, because they cannot continue operating their way. So now they want to change. And we have so many people, within that, group that is talking. Those are intellectuals. How they missed that point is beyond me, unless it is deliberate. We cannot continue, hiding and hide and seek. That the truth should come out. When SADC called for that meeting, and as they were tightening the screws, back home, MDC guys were being sworn in, thus making SADC look very foolish. To say, how can you be stopping an election that everybody is satisfied with? That is where we lost it, and we must speak it. ZANU-PF and the opposition have always been best of friends, and that is a fact.
The tragedy with violence is that it stifles all meaningful debate and democratic discourse. There has been very little meaningful debate and democratic discourse as things are already. But when you go into violence, the use of violence, you go another level. The little debate that has been there will be snuffed off. There will be no democratic discourse, which in many ways is the reason why 46 years after independence, we are still a failed state, incapable of governing ourselves. Because the regime has never allowed any meaningful debate to take place. It is hard to argue when you're looking up the business end of an AK-47 rifle. That is the truth. And so these reports of violence or the increase in violence is truly worrying. Here is a reminder of the violence of 2008.
2008 patakaita ma-elections pakaposa papinda Tsvangirai ndandiri election agent ya-president. Ma-results abuda tiri pa-party headquarters vamutasa vanga vari secretary vedu ve-administration vamutasa muripi ndafona ndiri kwarusapi komogwenda kwarusapi seka ma-results achibuda kudai vanga aiwa zvako izvo munangagwande zvako endaenda kumusha ofisi vanga vabisa zvinhu zvavo zvose watofunga kuti zani yadini yaparara. President ofona zvakamira sei kati ndomamira zvakaita takatodini kateda sei manje mama ndikati abvudzai baba nditaurira baba gadzirai politburo cabinet musarangarira zvimwe zvipi gadzirai chi cabinet asi nangoda kuti muzive kuti 2008 ma-results abuda vamutasa vakatiza.
As a country we face a generational transition. Vana vesa vari kuma below 35, they are crying out for help. The country is in a mess. Arusurufaro. We know we are inheriting a mess. We know this country has been left with nothing.
I'm assuring you that starting from tomorrow, you'll see a different nation from what you have seen or read on the news about these results and everything. Where we are going ahead there, the situation will be very different. What we said to our people, they could not see with their own eyes. We are going to act as we see it fit. We are prepared to go the whole distance.
If the truth be said, as long as we go down this route of the violence, there is really no point in having any discussion, because discussion is just a waste of time. Those who have the ability to deliver the violence will have the final say in the matter, period. And ZANU-PF knows it. And this is why it is absolutely important that the people of Zimbabwe speak with one voice and condemn this path that ZANU-PF is dragging us into. There is no way the ordinary people, particularly in the rural areas, will be able to fight back. I know some people have argued, and argued very well, that we want this amendment, constitutional amendment, to include a referendum. If the political atmosphere is charged with violence, and this could be what ZANU-PF's strategy is: intimidate particularly the rural voters into accepting this amendment. If the last minute the regime was to say, we are going to have a referendum, it will be too late to say, no, we don't want a referendum in the present volatile political situation where violence has been used, where clearly the voters are under coercion because all along people have been asking for a referendum. We need to be careful that we do not box ourselves into a situation where we continue fighting for a referendum on the constitutional amendment, and we take our eyes off what is happening, i.e., the systematic violence when it's being shown, when it's happening in the urban centers. Let me rest assure you, in the rural areas, the situation is a lot worse. So when it comes to the issue of violence, I honestly think that that is a red flag that we have got to fight and say no to. Because if we don't, we will have the referendum, but whose results are already predetermined. Because the rural people have been beaten up into submission.
No, I wouldn't spend most of my time dwelling on the referendum. Yes, the people have the right to choose and so forth. But how did we get here? Look, we keep, blundering from pillar to post. The same man that instigated the 2008 violence became president through millions of Zimbabwe, both ZANU-PF, opposition, and neutral. They supported the 2017 coup and took this guy in, including some of the guys that were sitting in that video. They supported him. We have this idea that we can simply just write away or wipe clean historical facts and somebody will become a saint and the situation will bring out a better picture. And that is a lie. We knew what Mnangagwa is before he even took up Zimbabwe. And we sang. There was a song that, were being played and danced by millions of Zimbabwe, including intellectuals. Now the guy is calm. What did you expect? We all know. We are tired of Mnangagwa. Who do we want to bring in? Chiwenga. I mean, if I was in Zimbabwe, I would have been truly laughing to say these are the most foolish people this side of heaven. They have a neck for looking for trouble. They are like pigs, they love the mud. I mean, most of this pain and suffering that we are experiencing, it is self-inflicted. And we have stood up and said, the real problem is rigged election. SADC has said rigged election. AU has said the same. EU, the list goes on. Zimbabweans, they don't see no problem with that. So it's either the rest of the world is wrong and we are right, And guess where our right has brought us? This is it. We have been giving ZANU-PF the leverage they need, and hence they have the power to do what they please. What we should be sitting down is, we have been giving them legitimacy. Let us take away that legitimacy from them. If there are no reforms, there should be no elections, and the people should make it known. That is the only way. We can talk about all the secondary issues that, the shops are empty, there is violence, there is abduction. Everything comes down to rigged election. ZANU-PF does it so that they can rig elections. They will beat up and, intimidate the rural people so that they can win rigged elections. That is all that is to it. If we will look at every single problem that we have right now in Zimbabwe, the list is endless. But let us address the cause, the primary problem that is causing all these other secondary things to happen. And I think we would have made the first big, step in a very, very long time. Think about it.
Just would like to remind those of you who would like to join us Saturdays and Sunday evenings, 6 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time, to use the link that is being shown on your screen there. Tonight, I know we are not using it because the setting up was done incorrectly. But tomorrow we'll be back on that link, and we'd like to continue on this issue of as Zimbabweans walking into this hell on earth through this constitutional amendment number 3, ZANU-PF made highway. The answer to that, I'm afraid, has to be yes, we are sleepwalking into it. So if we were to put aside the issue of the violence, if violence was not an issue, because as long as it's an issue, there cannot be any meaningful debate, like I said. But if violence were to be put aside, how should this debate go? That is another serious matter that we should seriously look into. Here is Tendai Biti speaking on the launch of the Constitution Defenders Forum.
Frustrated out there. They don't understand why, if they've been voting in 13 elections since 1980, voting for a president and voting for a president after every 5 years, they are being suddenly told that you are not going to have an election in 5 years, but in 7 years, and that you are no longer going to vote for a president. Parliament is going to choose a president for you. They don't accept that because they went to war. The freedom fighters on my left went to war to assert that right. They don't accept that. Zimbabweans are rejecting this in churches, in beer halls, in schools, in communities, in commuter omnibuses. Zimbabweans are rejecting that. They want their president. They want to choose their president. They want their election, and they want their election in 5 years. Havasi kunzwisisa chikonzero chekuti after makore anopfuura 45 vachingosarudza mutungamiri wenyika. Vaakumuka mangwana vachinzi havachasarudza mutungamiri wenyika. Mutungamiri wenyika akusarudzwa nevanhu 300 vari muparamende, vanhu vanotengeka. Makore uno kwaane zvigananda zviri kufamba nemabhegi emari zvichanotenga maparliamentarians kuti achuze. So havasi kuandastenda kuti why election yakunzi after 7 years. 7 years dzakareba, hama dzangu. Mana anozvarwa anozoenda kuchikoro after 7 years. So vazhinji vanenge vafa tikamirira the next 7 years. So vazhinji vari kuramba izvozvo.
I think this is a valid argument. When this issue started up, we raised the same issue on this platform. That you cannot have a situation where the MPs and the president were elected by the people on the understanding that they will serve a maximum of 5 years. It is pathetic that the same individuals, now that they are in power, should decide, no, we are going to stay on in power for more than 5 years. However, we have got to accept the political reality in Zimbabwe that Zimbabweans have never held free, fair, and credible elections for the last 46 years. In other words, as much as this amendment is seeking to give the president and the MPs an extension of their stay in office, the truth of the matter is the people themselves have never elected these people in the first place because ZANU-PF has been rigging elections. This is an illegitimate regime compounding its illegitimacy by fraudulently extending their stay in office. But the first point of call here is to accept that for 46 years, the people of Zimbabwe have never really had a meaningful say in the governance of the country because ZANU-PF rigged the elections. You understand that bit, then you will also understand that ZANU-PF, Mnangagwa and these ZANU-PF colleagues, ever since the 2023 elections, they did not want the issue of those elections having been rigged and they being illegitimate. They didn't want that issue on the table. So from a few weeks after the elections, the nation started hearing of this ED 2030 agenda, demanding that Mnangagwa's stay in power should be extended by another 2 years. It was done for a specific purpose, to draw attention away from the fact that the regime is illegitimate in the first place. And what is disappointing is that the people swallowed the bait, the hook, the line, and the sinker. They focused on, we don't want Mnangagwa's term of office to be extended, and forgot that he is illegitimate. And even more significantly, forgot that without implementing the democratic reforms ZANU-PF will rig the next elections just as easily. So that is the double-edged sword. ZANU-PF, as much as people would want to pretend, ZANU-PF is not playing the simple game that Chamisa and company are playing. Checkers at best, Nodo at worst. ZANU-PF is playing a game of chase. And there are 3 or 4 moves ahead of the people. And that is a point that must be emphasized here.
The way I look at it is, in as much as ZANU-PF are looking very clever or well advanced, we must say that we have had for the past 26 a very poor organized opposition and very deceitful one at worst. MDC-CCC and all the likes of Tendai BT and Chamisa and all these characters will never come out in the open and say we have been participating in rigged elections and it was a mistake. There are people that will never admit their shortcomings. So they will keep us having a fight, a losing battle, and they win something at the end of the day. That is all that has been happening. We've been taken round and round in circles by people who know very, very well that elections are rigged in Zimbabwe and still sit down and tell you that you have a right to vote for a president. You have been voting for a president. How do I vote for a president with rigged when the elections themselves are rigged? When the elections do not represent the will of the people? When they lose elections and they're not going home, they're going into parliament, they're going into, portfolios and so forth. They cry with you, but theirs is said. You go home unhappy, sad, and all that. We have had an opposition that is having it both ways and would rather have us this way. That way they remain significant. Tendai BT is on record saying that he will defend this constitution. He is prepared to go and live in the mountain. But when he was in government, he did not defend the constitution when it needed to be defended. He did not defend you and I when we needed reforms. He did not defend SADC when they came knocking to ask them to implement reforms. How then will he go now to the mountains? It's another lie. Our opposition, they have figured out that we will be opposition and we will settle for what ZANU-PF is willing to give us. And they have now an understanding between them and ZANU-PF. All these other things is just for them to remain relevant. That is how I see it.
Yeah, I just wanted to close and go back to that SAPES group discussion and just listen to what Professor Matuku had to say on that discussion.
All of us in South Africa, we have the resources to get there. And then we force the South African government to be hosting us by force. So we have a meeting in South Africa or a meeting in Zambia and so on, where we are not arrested. But South Africa must be the target. We don't want to overload it with we just simply want the space. Where we are denied the space here, we can just go there, have a day, all of us, issue all our statements and from there, outline our programs from there when we know there's no police officers going to beat us up, and drive back to our country and so forth. Now, that way we involve the SADC countries. I'm saying that is the fifth position I'm adding, is a program that forces SADC, whether it likes it or not to persuade them. They must find us on their soil talking about Zimbabwe, planning about Zimbabwe. That is what happened with the liberation struggle. Mozambique, Zambia, Tanzania, they were forced because they simply found people in their territories. Whether those governments in now would say, we welcome you like we were welcomed in Zambia, Mozambique, Tanzania, and so on, by the Nyereres, the Kaundas, the Machels, and so forth, when they found Zimbabweans there, but dealing with it. I think that's what will happen. If you find us sitting in some space in South Africa, whether it's an open space or so, we have so many Zimbabweans there, and we are talking Zimbabwe, we are criticizing amendment number in a free place where there is no framework, where although we are courageous now, we don't want to be beaten every day, but we are not going to give up. So there are times when we want to do things in peace. There are times like now, I'll be at my NCA office almost all these days, continue with the small meetings there. But there are times when I want the whole world to see that I am with others. I'm with Professor Mandaza, not online but physically together.
I think this is, again, an interesting approach. We have got to admit as a nation that SADC gave us the opportunity to end the ZANU-PF dictatorship following the 2008 election debacle. It was SADC that forced ZANU-PF to accept the formation of the government of national unity. And the primary task of that government of national unity was to implement the democratic reforms. Credit where credit is due. SADC, particularly South Africa's then Minister Lindiwe Zulu, did nag MDC leaders to implement the democratic reforms during the GNU. They failed. When ZANU-PF cronies were asked, why is MDC leaders not implementing the democratic reforms? They boasted that the MDC leaders will never rock the boat. Mazwane MDC adziza kudya Nyerere, they boasted. And that is exactly what happened. The tragedy with Zimbabwe is that many of us, even now with the benefit of hindsight, we are refusing to accept that political reality. Benjamin earlier on talked about the 2023 elections and how SADC condemned the process as flawed and illegal. But they could not go the extra mile and deny ZANU-PF legitimacy as they did in 2008 because MDC leaders had participated in those flawed elections. They had conned their followers to participate in those flawed elections in their millions. Professor Lovemore Maduku was one of the opposition leaders who participated in the 2023 elections, just as he participated in the 2018 elections, knowing fully well that ZANU-PF was rigging, knowing fully well that ZANU-PF rigged those elections. In 2028, he was prepared to publicly admit that Mnangagwa had won those elections and they were free, fair, and credible. This was the condition for him being invited to join the Pollard group. Pollard was nothing more than those opposition leaders who had lost the 2023 elections, but were prepared, 2018 elections, but were prepared to publicly claim that the elections were free, fair, and credible. Maduku was one of them. He participated in 2023, no doubt, confident that Mnangagwa would form another Pollard. This time it didn't happen. And typical of this tyrannical regime, even those opposition leaders who have helped to keep ZANU-PF in power these last 26 years, when push comes to shove, the regime has shown again and again that it will turn on you. Indeed, we should not be surprised. This is a regime that is turned on its own members. ZANU-PF leaders, many ZANU-PF leaders have faced violence from the regime. And no doubt many have been killed. Mugabe himself, if he thought he was safe, woke up in November 2017 with a gun pointing at his temple, the military coup. And it was the very man that he himself had appointed as commander-in-chief, and he himself has appointed as his own vice president, who staged the coup. So in this particular case, this whole point of the opposition piling on the pressure on SADC to pay attention to Zimbabwe is, to say the least, ill-advised. Because we have to put our own house in order first. SADC helped us in 2008, 2013, and we wasted that opportunity. And if we can't even acknowledge that we wasted that opportunity, it is nonsensical to go to SADC. Because as much as SADC would want, for instance, to say, okay, let's go to another GNU, they've got to ask themselves, can they trust the opposition leadership that we see in both the organizations fighting to stop this amendment number 3? Can they trust them to implement the democratic reforms? I think the honest answer to that is no, they cannot. And why not? Because they are the same individuals who failed to implement the reforms during the 2008 to 2013 GNU. What has changed? Nothing. There's still the same corrupt, incompetent, and greedy individuals. Maduku himself, like I said, he was in the Pollard. He was the one who said Mnangagwa had won those elections free, fair, and credible to qualify for Pollard. Is he now saying that Mnangagwa rigged the 2018 elections, rigged the 2023 elections? The way the opposition have compromised themselves, including the other group that we saw the video with Tendai Biti talking, we included some of the war veterans. We know some of those war veterans have been fighting in Chiwenga's corner. They are adamant that Chiwenga should become the next president, undermining the very issue that we talked about, the failure to have a situation where the right of the individual, one man, one vote, means exactly that. We are in this mess because ZANU-PF leaders believe they have the divine right to rule. Many of the war veterans were involved in the 2017 military coup. They supported that coup. And they also wanted Mugabe to go, but in his place to impose Mnangagwa. We don't want to keep on repeating the same cycle. The opposition that people should be looking for are leaders who are truly committed to one man, one vote, with no exception. They should publicly condemn the ethos that ZANU-PF leaders have the divine right to rule. That should be condemned. Otherwise, we're just going round and round in circles here. Thank you very much. Ben, do you want to have your last words?
I think, you have spoken very well. The need for us to see the bigger picture is now more important than ever. Yes, the Constitution amendment is very important because it further strengthens ZANU-PF. But it is not the primary cause of our problems. Our problem is rigged elections. If you cannot have a government by the people and for the people, you end up in this very spot that we are sitting in. Zimbabwe is in a political mess because of rigged elections, elections that we have participated in, that the likes of Tendai Biti has participated in and encouraged millions to do so, knowing fully well that ZANU-PF rigs. I mean, they have seen it actually happen. For example, Tendai Biti, in his constituency, he saw people being bussed and he complained that this is illegal, of which it was, and I agree with him. But then he went on to win those elections and it became water underneath the bridge. That is unacceptable. That shows that there is no integrity. If you see wrong and you keep quiet and you then accept it, you are now part of that wrong. Now, like you said earlier, this can be documented in urban centers. What more in the rural areas? Some areas that they are not even any polling agents. We saw what FAS is capable of doing and what they did to the rural folk, where they had to go through, being marked a register before they go into the polling station, where they are surrounded and taken to the polling station. This happens. Who's going to protect them after we have encouraged them to do so? We need to see and to choose our leaders rightly. We need to have that open mind to say, what you are selling, I am not buying. Because it is utter nonsense. And we have been warned, not by one institution, but when you see, I'll give you an example. You fail something in school and you ask for them to remark it and it's sent to somebody else, and that same person, that other person fails you. It means clearly there is something wrong that you did. And we have had multiple observer missions correct us. But we still say, no, my answer is right. Here we are. Our answer is right. Now we are seeing ZANU-PF grow wings, taking up the constitution without even asking you anymore, because you have given up that right. By giving them legitimacy, by giving them that power to do what they want. And I always say, and I will continue saying, if we stand on the principle that if there are no reforms, there will be no election, we are taking that bold move that we have always been told to do. But that step has to start now. That step has to start today. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. I'd like to remind the listeners out there, if you want to join us tomorrow, Sunday, 6 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time, please join us, use the link that is on your screen right now. In closing, I would like to re-emphasize the point I made at the beginning, that if ZANU-PF is going to resort to violence, the kind of violence that we saw in Gukurahundi in 1983 to 1987, in the Operation Mafotera Papi in 2008, then we can forget about having a debate on any issue. Because when there is violence, reason has been thrown out of the window. So it is absolutely imperative that we should do everything in our power to make sure that ZANU-PF does not take us down that route of violence. The second point I would like to emphasize is that the number one issue in Zimbabwe, why for 46 years we've been stuck with this ZANU-PF dictatorship, is because we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And I would like to underline what Ben was saying there. The issue is not so much the amendment. ZANU-PF is thrown in this amendment to draw attention away from the real big issue, which is that Mnangagwa rigged the 2023 elections, and with no reforms being implemented, he will rig the next elections as well. He doesn't need this amendment to rig elections. He has been rigging elections for the last 46 years without that amendment. He has just thrown in the amendment the way a cynical individual would throw a thigh bone of an elephant at a puppy, knowing that the puppy will be so excited with the smell and try to get his jaw to chew that bone without much success. Think about it. Thank you very much again. Have a good night.